Welcome to the Roots Recap. I'm Patrick.
And I'm Tim. What are we going to talk about today, Patrick?
Well, today I'd love to talk about the FOMC minutes, Russia coming back, and the Trudeau expands to emergency powers over the
Yeah.
Canadian trucker standoff.
Yes.
So what did you think about those minutes? That 2 p.m. spike was quite exciting.
Yeah, it was an interesting day on the market. Like looking at it at the end, you can say not much really happened, but we were trading lower all morning, and right at 2 p.m. as the minutes get released, we shot right back to basically even and just held there for the rest of the day. So what I think kind of happened is the market was kind of pricing in a bit of bad news that was going to come out of the meeting. And what I think everyone was kind of expecting was confirmation of a rate hike, but it didn't happen. They kind of kicked the can down the road a little bit, and things are still the same. So there was no reason for the market to be down today. Recover right back to where it was. That makes sense to me.
Right, yeah. I think it was just like, it's, no news is better than bad news. They were already pricing in like the rate hikes, and so it just recovered a bit. I'm still a bit worried about the Russia situation, though. I mean, they said they were pulling back troops, but so far there has been no confirmation of them reducing any sort of activity in the area. So, I mean, I think Russia, even before like a couple weeks before this, said that something similar, and still their troops are on the border. So, what do you think about that? Or do you think we're going for World War III, or
I hope not.
solution?
I hope not. Let's hope for a diplomatic solution.
Yeah.
If things start getting thrown around, it gets real dangerous real quick. We're kind of too powerful for our own good. So, yeah, I don't know. It's a very frightening situation for sure.
Right.
I hope it does get resolved diplomatically, for sure. Yeah.
I think most people do, including
Yeah.
Russia. I mean, I think it's really all been about a bid to keep Ukraine out of NATO because they want those border countries as buffer. They don't want those to fall under Western hands.
Yes. Yeah. And yeah, it's a tricky situation. And I'm glad you sort of said it out that way, because it's like, I don't know, kind of like a game of Risk. Like, where are you vulnerable? And if your neighboring countries are directly an enemy with you, or like not an enemy per se, but like not someone who you historically get along well with, it's probably, I don't know, more beneficial for you if it's kind of a neutral country, someone that's not actively going to invade or you need to worry about defending anything, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly why a bunch of Chinese volunteers showed up on the North Korean border during like the actual North Korean War, even though it's still technically going on.
Interesting.
Yeah. And China's given them a lot of support to keep that buffer zone between China and the West.
War is interesting, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of history to be learned. Yeah, for sure.
So besides Russia, I heard Trudeau declared emergency powers right in your own backyard.
Yeah. So it's a new act to basically replace the War Measures Act, and that basically gave the government some new rights, and it's kind of seen sort of as like the last step before you would declare martial law. It's like the government sort of snapping back and giving themselves a lot of power to be able to control a situation that they don't want getting out of hand. Because if it does get out of hand and they can't control it anymore, that's when martial law comes into play. Right. And people have to start fending for themselves, and the government stops having like a police force and things like that, which we don't want to see it get to. I think everything's kind of just being a little blown out of proportion. But you said it earlier while we were talking. What was the word you used about the protest?
There was a counter protest, actually.
Yeah, there was a counter protest. That's what it was.
To their own protest. Ironically, both sides are calling the other side Nazis. I mean,
yeah, and
completely boundless for both.
Yeah, like it's a weird situation. People are pointing and screaming at each other just for the sake of pointing and screaming at each other. And
Yeah.
I feel like the vast bulk in the middle is just sort of looking at this and like, what's going on?
That's American politics right there. That's
Yeah,
like,
and
it's just
like
both the extremes.
in Canada, it's a little bit different. We're a multi-party system. We like to think we have a little bit more of a choice, but like it's always conservative or liberal. Like there's not really any other major thing. In the past few years, and like I don't know, sometimes back in like the 90s, NDP has kind of risen in a little bit during like kind of changes in leadership within the parties, and NDP is kind of like number three all the time. But
What is NDP for those people who aren't in
New Democratic Party. So it's like more liberal than the liberals.
extra liberal?
Extra liberal. Yeah, but it's interesting, and it is good to have more than two choices. I think personally, but whenever you still have such a large divide between, I don't know if it's the majority of the population, but the majority of the like media seeking population, I want to say, like there's a lot of advertising, if we want to call it that, or we could even say propaganda for either side, and it sucks to see, especially whenever you're trying to influence young people to vote a certain way to sort of keep your party alive and basically, I don't know, have some pretty contrasting opinions because it's easier to, I don't know, sort of go extremist one end or the other.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy the state of things right now. I think it'll be interesting to see how Canada handles the trucker protest.
Yeah. Well, it's making its way. It's been a couple of weeks now. It's spread out from the capital. There's been a lot of things kind of starting to happen. A lot of like fines and stuff being given out, and they're trying to like really discourage people from attending these sorts of things, which is just kind of a move against free speech, honestly, sort of, right? So like you got to be really careful how you play these sorts of things out because it gets interpreted.
Right, yeah. I mean, I think that kind of reminds me of like, what was it, the Black Lives Matter movement? I think it was 2 years ago. But yeah, there was a lot of police and stuff, and then like right after that, there were other movements. Fucking nothing. They had like riot gear. They were shooting people with rubber bullets and everything, and then they had like the assault on the Capitol, and basically
it's crazy. It's been a wild couple of years. Like it really has. Like it's things are changing globally. Yeah.
So do you think, just before we close off, do you think with the FOMC minutes and them basically saying that they're going to continue balance sheet runoff and increase federal interest rates, do you think we'll see all-time highs in the S&P, or
good question.
Going to continue flat?
Yeah, so there's kind of two ways you can sort of think about it. The first being that inflation's been talked about for the past 2 years. We all know the government's spending more money. And is that inflation built into the market already? The massive growth we've seen last year, we basically had 2 years with over 20% gains on the S&P 500 in a row, which is huge.
Yeah.
So inflation may be priced into the equity market, right?
Yeah.
Now, alternatively, we could say that we're waiting for the market to catch up. We need to see how spending works out, and it's yet to sort of impact the market. So it's interesting. Like the cost of things being higher should reflect to higher sales, but it's also going to reflect to higher material cost.
Right.
So all things being relatively even, it shouldn't really impact profit margins a whole lot, but people are going to be drawing more revenue, but they're going to be paying more too.
Right.
And where it really sort of like settles down and impacts is the working class, because they probably didn't get a 7.5% raise last year.
No.
If you did, great, good job. You have an amazing employer. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say the vast majority probably did not. So their effective spending power is a little bit less, and it's harder to afford things that are more expensive.
Right.
And if you were luckily invested in the equities market over the past couple of years, you may have already seen some of that benefit hit your investment accounts.
Mm.
So it's an interesting time. I hope that sort of gives you an answer of how
No,
I
I thought that
think
was
about it.
great. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I hope all of our listeners thought it was great too. And if I want to say, I hope you enjoyed today, Roots recap. If there was anything that you wanted to hear about but didn't, let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe and check out the information for more great places to enjoy great content and great content providers. Thank you. It's been Roots Recap.
Take care.